And so one day she ends up getting adopted. Almost said abducted. Alrighty, my name is Kelsey, and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my February wrap up. I forgot to mention I got a new microphone, so ignore that, the whole video. That's definitely going to be showing. So, in true Kelsey fashion at this point, it's later than I anticipated. We had a stomach bug at our house a few weeks ago, and I'm still catching up on recording and all those fun schedules and things. So, you're going to see this when you see this. But it is time to talk about books that I read in February, which weren't that many. So this should be a relatively short video. Let's just dive into the stats. Why don't we just jump right in? I read 5 things in February, and while they were pretty high as far as ratings go, it took me so long because I was really focusing on one book, which I will talk about when we get to it. But 5 books, which was over 1,426 pages and about 42 and a half hours listened, which was over 2 audiobooks, 1 ebook, and 2 mixed. Age categories is pretty actually spread out this month. We had 1 YA, 1 new adult, and 3 adult books. Genres, we had 3 fantasy, 1 romance, and 1 contemporary. And the ratings, we had 1 5-star, 3 4-star, and then 1 DNF. So the first book I picked up was actually a buddy read, or it's part of a read-along, which is the second book in the Hathaway series by Lisa Kleypas, which is Seduce Me at Sunrise. I'm taking this one 4 stars. I'll put the announcement video down below if you want to follow along. They're reading 1 book a month. So this was the February pick. Trigger warnings in this book for infidelity and then abusive family historically. Like, it's not on the page, but it is like mentioned because one of our characters has dealt with this in the past. So this series is very similar in vibes to the Bridgerton series, where it follows one family, the Hathaways, and each book follows a different sibling. There are 5 siblings. This just happens to follow the second oldest daughter. So there are 4 girls and 1 son, and the son is the oldest. But the last book follows the oldest daughter, and now we're following the second oldest, which is Wen. And she ended up getting, I believe it was scarlet fever when she was younger, and pulls through, but it has made her very, very weak. And so in this book, she goes off to this specialist. He claims that he can help her, and so she goes off and spends, I think it's a couple of years abroad getting help, and the story kind of really gets kicked off when she comes back, and she has feelings for this guy named Kev, who is someone who was like taken in by their family, so he's always been around, and they kind of grew up together, but she's always kind of had feelings for him and vice versa. So it's their romance. I was nervous going in because the first book was just kind of okay, but I did enjoy this one more. I think we have the first book like 3.5 stars, and this one being a 4-star. Clearly I enjoyed it a little bit more, but it is not like the most amazing book I've ever read. It's fine. It's a good historical romance. There's a lot of pining and like back and forth between the 2 of them, because like she's very clear in the beginning of having feelings for him, and even tells him about it, and he's like thinks because of his upbringing, and he doesn't really have a lot of knowledge of his backstory, and then he does kind of discover his backstory throughout this book. He thinks that he's not worthy of her, and so he won't let himself be put in a situation where the 2 of them can be a thing. So my favorite part of this book was Kev discovering his backstory, because we do learn a lot about him. We learn a lot about his growing up. He didn't have the best situation growing up, but he also didn't really know his history. And so and then there's the guy who's the main love interest in the first book, are connected. And they have they have the same tattoo, and they can't figure out why they have the same tattoo. And the guy from the first book is very interested and wants to learn, and Kev doesn't care. Like, they have very different opinions of this one thing. Like, one person thinks it's a good thing, one person thinks it's a bad thing. And so like he has been like brought up to think poorly of himself. And so he's got a lot of trauma in his past that he is dealing with. So the decisions he makes make sense, but it just like once the couple kind of like had their like get together moments, it was like I stopped kind of caring about their romance. They were fine. It was good. I liked Win as a character. I thought it was really interesting to see her, who's like gone away and kind of become this new person, dealing with people who think that she's still very, very weak. And she's like, I can do things now. Like I can walk a flight of stairs. It's okay. And so seeing her kind of take charge of her life again was really interesting to see. And I liked that. And she was very kind of, I won't say headstrong because she's not as headstrong as other characters that I've read, but she does have like she kind of sticks up for herself, which I enjoyed reading. So while it's not my favorite thing in the entire world, I still had a good time with it, I think is where I've landed on that one. The next one's also a buddy read, and that was Adrift and Currents Clean and Clear by Shauna McGuire. This is the 9th book in the Wayward Children's series. I was my friend Teresa. We've been reading this entire series together, so every time there's a new book, we just pick it up, and it's very fun, and I love it. This one I gave 4 stars. I really enjoyed this book, and trigger warnings in this book for ableism. So, this world I've talked a lot about, but basically it's takes place where like the first book, it's a series of novellas, and the first book takes place at this home for wayward children. And basically there are all these doorways, kind of like the kids from Narnia, Alice from Alice in Wonderland. They go through doorways and they come into a different world, which is perfect. Like something's not right in this world for them, but this something in this other world is perfect for them, and it's like their world. And there are tons of worlds out there. And so sometimes kids get kicked back to the real world or our world, and they can't acclimate back to society very well. So they go to this home. Their parents think that they're going there to be helped to acclimate back to society, or kind of help them because they don't think their kids actually went through doors. They think they just straight up disappeared. But the woman who owns this house actually went through a door when she was younger. So it's really just a place for them to be themselves. Some books take place at this home. Some books take place in the actual world. This one is one of the ones that kind of takes place in the world. We follow our main character, Nadia, and she grew up in a Russian orphanage. And so she was born without an arm, or without a hand and part of her arm. And so this is just her life. This is how she lives. She has no problem with this. Yes, sometimes things are a little bit harder for her than other people, but like this is what she's grown up with. She knows how to deal with the world. One day she ends up getting adopted by this Western Christian couple who you kind of learn throughout this novella are really just like doing what they think is society appropriate, and like they're helping someone out. And so they adopt this person, and I think it's, at least the wife, it makes it sound like this is her attempt to keep the marriage going well. So there are a lot of rules in this house of like what is good and what you should do and all this kind of stuff. And then one thing that this couple does is they get Nadia fitted for a prosthetic, and she doesn't want a prosthetic. She's fine with the way that she is. She has no problem with the fact that she doesn't have an arm. And so it's that conversation, and then she ends up going into her world, which is all about water and turtles and tortoises, and it's really interesting, and she grows up a lot in this world. I really enjoyed this story. I thought it had a lot of good conversations about ableism, and like this couple thinking that this is what, like they didn't really ask Nadia what she wanted. They just assumed that she would be happy with the fact that she would have an arm, whereas you see when she has it, it's really painful and it's really uncomfortable, and she has learned how to deal with certain things, and now she can't do those things. And so it's like harder for her to be out and about in the world because this arm makes it harder for her. And so it just seemed, that conversation I thought was really interesting. And then the other thing I found really interesting was this is one of the few characters, I think we've met maybe one other person who goes in their world and has been in their world long enough that they grow up. Like she is 19 or 20, I want to say, by the end of her time in the world. And then when she gets kicked back into our world, she has a 19, 20-year-old brain, but she's back in her like 10-year-old body. And so maybe she's a little bit older than that, but like it's that vibe of like she's grown up, but when she comes back to our world, she's back to the way that she was when she left. And so having this person have to deal with being in a younger body when they've grown, and like they are conscious of the fact that they have grown and their brain has grown. And so I thought that was a really interesting conversation, and I'm curious. I feel like we've met her before, because that rings a bell, but I don't remember a lot about her. So I'm curious if she will come back into other future books, um, because she was interesting, and I really enjoyed it. And I just really like these books because even though they're really short, they're like really packed full with a lot of information, but it doesn't feel like too much. It feels like the appropriate amount of stuff for the length of the book. I don't know how to explain it. It's just written really, really well. So I liked this. There's a lot of good moments, a lot of good quotes throughout this book, and I think this is one of the ones that you can read as like a standalone. There's a few in the series that are good standalones, and I believe this is one of those. All right, the next one, we're about to get a little ranty here, is my DNF, and that is The Coven by Harper L. Woods. I DNF is about 64% of the way through. Trigger warnings. Oh, I literally just wrote literally so many, look them up. I think there's a page at the beginning of the book where the author goes through everything that's in this book. So if you can find that. There's just so many, I don't want to forget one, It's a lot of morally gray situations. So this book, okay, I picked this up for the book club that I'm in. And after we all started it, we realized the person who recommended it just recommended it because it was a pretty cover and didn't really know what it was about. And none of us liked it. I think out of the like 20 people, no, it's less than that. Out of the like 12 people who show up regularly for this, 3 showed up this time and only 2 had read it, and I didn't even finish it. So yeah, so it's romantasy. It's about a witch and vampires. That's kind of the world here. And the vampires are, there's like a curse that the witches put on them, so they are basically stuck in like human like forms. They feed off the witches, and the witches are okay with this, and they keep doing it because they're hoping that like eventually they'll break this curse and they can go back to their regular form, whatever that is. So you follow our main character who has grown up out of this coven, and is basically forced back into it because she's a great good descendant of like one of the big names, and it's basically a magic school. And so she is being forced to be a student at this magic school, and the guy is the headmaster. So there's already a weird dynamic between the two of them because of that, but there's supposed to be a romance between the two of them. And when I tell you, this book is incredibly sexual to the point of it does not need to be. Every single conversation that they have is a sexual innuendo for something. And sometimes it's not even an innuendo. They're straight up talking about stuff out loud in front of other people. Like at one point he's teaching a class and they have a straight up conversation in front of the entire class about the things that he would do to her. And I'm like, what is the point of this? It was like there's a level of like smutty, and that's fine. I like a good smutty book. You guys know this. This was excessive just for the sake of being excessive. And so I couldn't take anything seriously, and I zoned out so much. I think the world is interesting, and if I had gotten more of the world building elements, I would have liked it, but like the author didn't give me those. It was just really confusing, and as we were kind of learning along the way, it was confusing. Like it wasn't I wasn't given enough information for it to make sense. It's like all these random things were thrown at us. She does have like earth magic, natural magic, which I found interesting. I liked that element of it. I would like to read more books that like the main character has this sort of like earth magic that she can pull from the earth and give back to the earth, and it was just really, that part was cool. But that was about it. I didn't like the romance. I didn't care about them. I put this on a break because we pushed the book club back a week, and then I said, oh, I should probably pick this up and try. And then I tried a couple of chapters and went, I just can't. So the relationship was meh. The one person who did finish the book did kind of tell us what happened, and it was that the outcome was not worth it, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't care about this book. Pretty cover, should have worked. Romantasy, super smutty, between two people who should be together. There was just some dynamics, and a lot of this about this didn't work. So yeah, I DNF'd that. So I tried. I feel like I should get credit for trying. The next book is the one that I actually physically own. out of this list. I realized as I was trying to collect all the books that I was reading and was going to talk about, I only owned one. I talked about this in a vlog. It's my 5-star. I spent a lot of time because I want to dedicate a lot of time to it. And that is Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I technically started this at the end of January. Super thick and chunky, as you can see by all of my tabs. I devoured this book like it was nothing. I read this for the BookTube Made Me Gavin edition, if you will. So I'll leave that linked above if you are, or I don't remember where it is. I'll leave it linked above if you're curious about my thoughts, like in-depth thoughts as I was reading this. But the moral of the story is, this is a thick book, and I was a couple of chapters into it, and I knew that I was going to be obsessed with this world. So I took my time. I did not rush through. Even though all I wanted to do was read this book, I purposely only read this book when I could focus on it. Like I would read it or listen to it, because I did have the audiobook. I would listen to it in the car, and then I would come home and I'd read little bits before bed. So I would read them in pretty big chunks, but then I would go through and like devour those chunks. Again, I would highlight the crap out of this book. I know that's only one line, but like I really highlighted a lot of this book, and I really marked up this book a lot. It's my new favorite book of all time. I'm showing you really not big chunks, but I'm telling you, I did a bunch. Like I highlighted a lot of this book as I was going through it, and I'm obsessed. I am obsessed with these characters. I'm obsessed with this world. I slowed down, and I think taking this slowly is exactly what I needed to do, because I became obsessed to the point of like I have a friend who we send each other ACOTAR memes, like that's how we communicate, and reels and things of that nature. And I was 30% of the way through the book, and I texted her and said, you need to get on this when you get a chance. And she then immediately picked it up and read it in like one sitting. That's probably an exaggeration. It was probably a couple of sittings, but like very, very quickly. I'm telling you, this is good. So this follows. Let me tell you what it's about. This follows our main character, Saris, who grew up or lives in this like desert world. Water's rationed. She lives in like the poorest section of it. They have kind of been quarantined because the queen basically says that there's like this illness that they have, even though that's not true. They don't have an illness. She just doesn't want to deal with them. And so Saris grew up in this section, and she ends up stealing something from a guard, which causes a lot of issue, which eventually she gets arrested and goes to the palace. And while she's at the palace, she discovers this sword in metal. Fun fact, that metal is called Quicksilver, and it's actually a portal, and she is one of the few people who can make it liquefy and open said portal. So she does this and ends up being picked up by this guy named Kingfisher, who's this guy right here. And he's just your average brooding bad guy. No one likes him. He's got a dark history, and then of course as they get to know each other, they communicate through banter, and I love them. Okay, so the next thing, this plot-wise, nothing like ACOTAR. I'm not going to compare this book to ACOTAR. I am, however, going to compare my experience and how obsessed I was with ACOTAR was the same as I was when I was reading this. Like when I read Akamath for the first time, those feelings, that's what I had reading this book. And so I think if you enjoy things like that, there's a chance that you will enjoy this book, but I'm not going to say that this book is like ACOTAR, because it's not. It has moments and it has characteristics that are similar, but like I'm not going to do the injustice of comparing those two. My feelings, however, I will compare those because they were the same, and I just became so incredibly obsessed with these characters and so incredibly obsessed with this world. And like, this is not a thin book, clearly, and I took the time to understand everything. I am in love with our characters. I love how it ended. I love where we got to. This is just like, it has a lot of elements that you're probably going to that are probably going to be reminiscent of other romantasy books that you have read if you're a big romantasy person. But I feel like that was not a deterrent for me. Like I knew that going in that there were going to be things that were not going to be original to this book, because it's romantasy. There are things that are just staples of that genre. But I thought the world itself was really interesting. I liked learning new things about all these different characters. I mean, I highlighted stuff super early. They do have a pronunciation guide in the front if you're curious. And I want the second one now. Not because this ended on a cliffhanger, while it did have, it was technically a cliffhanger, but it also felt like a good end point. So I am satisfied. I am okay waiting. But I'm also not okay waiting because I love these characters and I just want to dive back into the world with them. This is my new obsession. I think about this constantly. I sit back and sometimes I reread sections of this book. I am so happy I picked this up. I thought I was going to enjoy it. I thought this had all the elements of a book that I would really like. I just didn't realize how wholeheartedly obsessed I was going to get with this. So, yes. Oh, I do have quick trigger warnings. So, the ones that I wrote down are gore, physical trauma, and then there's threat of abuse / sexual assault. So, like, it's not on the page, but there's threats of it. I loved it. If you like romantasy, if you like dark, brooding characters that are super mysterious, but they have a heart of gold, and there's banter between the two of them, and our main character can fight for herself. There's so many elements that I loved about them, and I can't stop thinking about it. So I love them. This was great. Best book of the month by a long shot. So glad I decided to kind of take my time with it. I feel like that really solidified my love for it. The last book that I ended up picking up in the month was the 6th volume of Fense by C.S. Picot and Johanna the Bad. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This is the most recent volume of Fense that came out, I think, a couple of years ago. It looks like we're going to get one every, 2 or 3 years at this point, so I really want the next one. But this follows a fencing team, which I just picked up the first one on a total whim, and I love them. So this one, they're at this competition. No, it's a workshop camp thing. It's like a week long, and so they are working and competing against the other teams that they will eventually compete with. And we see some characters go on a date for the first time. We see some backstory to both our main characters. We see a lot of stuff with the other characters in this. As always, I always feel like we learn a lot about the fence as a sport, and so there's not a lot to say about this because it's really short, very slice of life almost. It's not, because there is a continual story and you do have these characters that you are growing close to, but it's very much feels really, really short. And I feel like by the time I'm really back in this world and ready to love these characters, we're done with the volume. So I'm wondering if waiting until there's a few volumes out to pick this one up again would be good, because I feel like I'm done with it. And I'm like, but I got invested again, and I want these characters. I want more from these stories, and there is no more. So that makes me sad. But who knew that I would be invested in a series about a fencing team? Certainly not me. So I don't have a lot to say about this. I just love all the characters. I love getting to see them. Every new volume, we have something else uncovered behind some of the characters. And this one, I feel like we took a lot of steps in the relationship department, not necessarily romantic, but yes, romantic. But there's also some friendships that we took some steps in. And I just feel like we got a lot of character growth in this one. And I love them. That's the moral of the story, is I love them. And it was great. And I'm glad I picked it up. I picked it up super randomly, just at the very end of the month. It wasn't my TBR, but I wasn't sure I was going to get to it. And then I just had time. So I did. And I enjoyed it. So it was good. I feel like I don't have anything to say about it, but besides that, it was good and I enjoyed it. So if you liked the first few, I think you're going to continue to like the series. Give it a shot. It's super random, but in my opinion, it's definitely worth it. And that's it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of February. Again, a very short reading month, but I had a new all-time favorite with Quicksilver, so that took up a lot of my time. I also feel like it's the shortest month of the year, which I do have to remind myself, but also I feel like my reading mojo is all over the place. Sometimes I'm very invested, I'm ready to read, let's go. And then sometimes I am not. So this month really we hit all of that. But let me know if you've of course read any of the books that I mentioned in today's video, or something that you read in February. Do you have a new favorite you want to hear about? Do you have a DNF that you need to rant about? Let me know all your thoughts down below. Oh, and if you want to comment something but you're not sure what to comment, comment a butterfly for Quicksilver, because why not? But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you want to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media as well as other fun bookish links down below, so don't forget to check all of that out. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!